Keller grew up unable to hear or see to become a celebrated author, speaker and activist for the deaf and blind. She graduated from Radcliffe College in 1904, campaigned for women's suffrage and founded Helen Keller International, a nonprofit dedicated to saving the sight and lives of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged in Africa and Asia. Helen Keller was an author, lecturer, and crusader for the handicapped. Born in Tuscumbia, Alabama, she lost her sight and hearing at the age of 19 months to an illness now believed to have been scarlet fever. 5 years later, on the advice of Alexander Graham Bell, her parents applied to the Perkins Institute for the Blind in Boston for a teacher, and from that school hired in Mansfield Sullivan. Through Sullivan's extraordinary instruction, the little girl learned to understand and communicate with the world around her. She went on to acquire an excellent education and to become an important influence on the treatment of the blind and deaf. She began a slow process of learning to speak under Sarah Fuller of the Horace Mann School for the Deaf, also in Boston. She also learned to lip read by placing her fingers on the lips and throat of the speaker while the words were simultaneously spelled out for her. At age 14 she enrolled in the Wright Humason School for the Deaf in New York City, and at 16 she entered the Cambridge School for Young Ladies in Massachusetts. She won admission to Radcliffe College in 1900 and graduated cum laude in 1904. Helen Keller's personal accomplishment was developing skills never previously approached by any similarly disabled person. She also lectured on behalf of the American Foundation for the Blind, for which she later established a $2 million endowment fund. She then co-founded the American Civil Liberties Union with American civil rights activist Roger Nash Baldwin and others in 1920. Helen Keller was an author, activist, and educator whose lifetime of public advocacy for many communities and causes had lasting global impact. Keller, who became blind and deaf as a result of a childhood illness, learned to communicate with hearing people by having signals pressed into her palm, reading lips by way of touch, reading and writing Braille, and eventually speaking audibly. She helped to change perceptions of the deaf community and the blind community. Widely honored throughout the world and invited to the White House by every U.S. president from Grover Cleveland to Lyndon B. Johnson, Keller altered the world's perception of the capacities of the handicapped. More than any act in her long life, her courage, intelligence, and dedication combined to make her a symbol of the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. Her efforts to improve treatment of the deaf and the blind were influential in removing the disabled from asylums. She also prompted the organization of commissions for the blind in 30 states by 1937. She began a slow process of learning to speak under Sarah Fuller of the Horace Mann School for the Deaf, also in Boston. She also learned to lip read by placing her fingers on the lips and throat of the speaker while the words were simultaneously spelled out for her. Helen Keller died on June 1, 1968, in Easton, Connecticut, at the age of 87. She had bought her home in Easton in 1936 and called it Arkin Ridge, and it remained her permanent residence until her death. Thank you for watching Unfolding Saga.